Hey everybody, welcome back to Up the Vibe. And today I have the pleasure of speaking to Amy Belair, who is the host of the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a podcast on both spiritual and psychic awakening. Hi Amy, how are you doing?
Hi, Joe. I'm so happy to be here and talking with you again.
Yeah, it's great to speak to you, having been on your podcast just over a year ago. That
Yeah,
my
that's right.
my time has flown, and since then you've moved house and you've had a baby. So tell me first about the changes in your life in this period.
Yeah, yes, I think shortly before I spoke with you, I was doing a ton of readings and a ton of podcast conversations, both for my podcast and other podcasts, and in preparation for having a baby. And then I had a baby, and like it was like the brakes were hit. Everything, he's a very sensitive soul, and he's my first colicky baby, so it's been quite a year. And then we also moved house, like you said, to a beautiful place in the countryside, which I'm so thrilled about. And at the same time that we were moving, I had a really significant autoimmune flare up. But I think it had to do with it was my own version of ascension symptoms, and I had to calibrate to all
Okay,
of that as well. So it's been whew, a journey since we
it's been
last spoke.
for sure. And you recently came back onto your podcast after a bit of a break. And tell me a bit about that, because from listening to your own podcast, it seems quite a profound period that you had as well.
Yeah, it was. It was so, I mean, it had so much to do with those things, right? Like I kept working um, after I had William, my son, and like through the period of our move and even with the autoimmune flare up. But something really happened in January. Like I was so pumped for everything to keep going in December, even though I was feeling like really tired as well. But I was still full of creative juice. And then all of a sudden in January, it was like, it's like I went blank. It was such a strange
Hmm.
feeling. Um, it wasn't it wasn't depression because I wasn't sad and nothing was wrong. I wasn't hopeless, but it was very similar to depression in terms of like the internal state, like sort of like this is going to sound, I don't know, kind of dramatic, but it was like, why am I getting, like, what is there to get up for in the morning? But it wasn't a I feel sorry for myself thing. And like obviously I get
Hmm.
up for my kids, and in one of those ways it's like, thank goodness I have kids because I have to get
Yeah.
up in the morning.
Hmm.
But it was just a really like, it's like all of my ambitions just disappeared and all of my sense of direction disappeared.
Hmm.
And um it took a long time to process. It really threw me off kilter because I didn't know what was happening. I also, like, my grandfather passed away in January, which actually was a relief and a blessing for him to just
Hmm.
be released from, a life of dementia and COVID lockdowns. And and then we all got COVID, and that kind of like compounded it all. But
Hmm.
honestly, it started at the very beginning of January, and it took me until I think it was the end of February, beginning of March, to be like, hold on, I'm having it felt like I was having old like new like an iOS upgrade, like some operating system upgrade. So old hardware had to be disinstalled or deinstalled, and that's what January felt like. And then the new software had to be installed,
Hmm.
and or new hardware, I don't know, whatever. It just felt big, like it wasn't a little thing, it was a really big thing. But since then, I have so much more clarity and more understanding of sort of what is happening here and who I am. I believe that what happened was like a large portion of my ego just dissolved, which does not mean that I don't have an ego. It's just like things that I really used to anchor myself in my understanding of who I am in the world, just they just were released. They just
Hmm.
weren't relevant anymore. And hence that feeling of like, what am I doing? What am I getting up for? What is meaningful to
Yeah.
me? Um, and it was because bigger things had to come in. So it's like space had to be cleared up for those bigger things.
Yeah. When I came on your podcast, part of the reason was to discuss and to talk about my journey, which was started sort of in 2019, around then, when I started to open myself up to trying to understand the world in a different way and break down some of my belief systems. And certainly before I came on your podcast around 2020, I felt that the more and more I got into the topics of, what's going on with the deep state, with awakening, expanding consciousness, and all this, I did feel that I was becoming a little bit ungrounded and needed to reground myself back into the 3D and just reappreciate what was still a part of my life, really, and still is now, obviously. But would you say that some of that was there as well in the last few months? A little bit of being so involved and so aware of what's going on in the world and the light codes and everything going on, that you needed to sort of come back a little bit to the 3D a bit and reground a little bit?
I feel like that's actually what's happening with me right now. Like, so where I am, it's almost 20 to 4 in the afternoon, and today is normally my day off, and I just spent the whole morning, I sent my husband out to just have some alone time, and I just did a bunch of therapeutic cleaning and hung out with my kids, and it was
Okay.
fantastic.
All right.
And it was like, it's funny because I keep thinking like, oh, maybe I need to hire a nanny to come help me, or like, I don't know, like I should outsource these things because they're not necessarily from a certain perspective, they're not the best use of my time. But actually, when I lean into it, I'm like, no, I have to do these things. They're so grounding.
Mm-hmm.
They do bring me out of all of that outside world stuff
Mm-hmm.
and back into just like, feathering my nest and tending to my family and tending to
Yeah.
my body and our needs. But I would say over the course of 2022, I mean, that might have been part of it too in January. Like, I just totally disconnected from any of it. I actually have no
Mm.
idea what's going on in the news, except for what I pick up from my husband kind of gives me updates. Like, I know the Roe versus Wade thing. But it's like I know it at just a very surface level,
Yeah.
because the same as you were saying, like it was very ungrounding, and I could feel the way that my powerful creatorship energy was being compromised. It was being funneled towards, all of these things, even in the pursuit of truth and like disclosure and all that stuff. It's still, at the end of the day, when I checked in with myself, it felt very disempowering. Like I was making my moves, I was strategizing my life around things like mandates and whatever
Mm.
stuff we were hearing in the news at the time. And I
Mm.
was like screw that.
Yeah.
I don't need to play this game. I
Yeah.
can be here, but I don't need to play that game.
Sure. Yeah, I feel the same way in terms of in 2020, relating back to that period. I felt, as I got more into it and started to be a bit of a rebel, I must say, in terms of what was going on. A lot of people following, the masks and lockdown and everything. And now I wanted to just to stand up and say, no, this isn't right. But I felt that in that period, I was feeding the beast to a certain extent, and
Yeah.
I recognized that. And I think I needed to stop and to just to kind of check in with myself and just work on myself. And as you say, I've become very I don't know if alienated, is that the right word, from the news. I feel like it's like a theater that's going
Yes.
on out there. It's
Yeah.
I could watch a soap and feel the same way. It's just a lot of theater and a lot of emotions going one way, and then it's the next day it's a new thing, and that's okay, it's going on. But I know that more and more people are waking up to the theater and seeing that they don't need to divert so much energy to that, and to put more energy into themselves. And I think that is part of the transition that everyone's going through at their own way. And I've certainly felt that myself, not just in terms of what I've been talking about, but also starting this podcast. It was a a journey for me to go through, and it's part of that kind of that transition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you mentioned earlier, I just wanted to say that it reminded me, today I've done some therapeutic pressure washing and planting some vegetables in the garden. So yes, being
Yeah,
with the earth is so important right now, at least in these times, and just getting your feet muddy, in the garden and things.
it is. And
Yeah.
like those kind of, root chakra activities they're around survival, but they're also around thriving.
Mhm.
But it's like self-reliance and like being sort of turning our focus inwards towards ourself and our well-being and what we need day to day in order to be well. For me, those activities, I used to, it's not that I outsourced them before, like I've always done them myself and I've always kind of enjoyed them, but have also have an avoidant relationship with them for a long time in my life. And this year I'm really feeling called to like tidy all that stuff up, like go through my accounting and like get all of my numbers really sorted out, not just last minute in like taxes are due way, but like, really looking at my numbers and being present with them and getting down on my hands and knees today and cleaning my kitchen floor and cleaning the fronts of the cupboards, like all those things that are tending to my existence here. It
Mhm.
feels really good to do that. It feels like, therapeutic.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, Turning to your podcast, when I first heard about you, it was with Sam Tripoli, and I think listening to other guests on your podcast, it seems like that was quite a moment. It really did broaden your audience, because I hear
Yeah.
so many saying that's where I first heard you, and that was such a good interview. In For me, I started to understand and hear about the Akashic record. I think that was one of the things that I do remember most, amongst many other things in terms of the third eye and awakening and the conscious expansion and all this. Have you kept in touch with Sam?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just on Zero last month, like about a month ago, I think.
Okay.
Again. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. He was certainly one of the original podcasts. I think it was a time when I was thinking, so what's going on in the world? And this is when I was into what's going on with UFOs and with the pyramids and who built them. And I just thought, tinfoil hat, okay, let's put that in the search term in Spotify, and let's start to listen to this podcast. And bizarrely, I witnessed how it just revved up in terms of audience numbers so much in the start of 2020. And there's another podcast I was listening to called No Mercy, and then those two just sort of combine. It was kind of weird. I was listening to random podcasts, and then suddenly they'd sort of combine, sort of like all this worlds that were kind of disparate and seemed like unaligned started aligning and coming together. And I feel like I was lucky enough to sort of witness the growth of some part of this kind of truth movement, I guess, that's now big and and very present right now in the world.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I came to learn about the Tinfoil Hat podcast through the No Mercy podcast
Oh,
because
okay.
they
All
had
right.
Sam on as a guest, and
Yeah.
I was like,
Oh,
oh,
there you go.
he's smart. He knows some shit. I need to look into him.
Yeah. Yeah, the No Mercy podcast is another one. It's a lot of swearing, and it started off as about sports, sort of sports analysis, but somehow just randomly, I think one of the people on it decided, let's just do conspiracy stuff just for a bit of fun, and that it just took off in that world, because they were doing like loads of bets and things of what would happen next, and it was starting to
Yeah.
actually predict stuff, and it was kind of wow, there's something to this if you can sort of start to predict who's going to be the next, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was just things they could just predict, just watching the world just unfold in this kind of bizarre way as it did. Um, so yeah, I just want to know what kind of books do you read, and what sort of things do you do in your spare time to sort of keep yourself, educated, I guess, as well as just as well as fiction.
Yeah, I actually I haven't read any books in a really long time. I think the last book that I really got into was the Game of Thrones series, and that was
All
like
right.
7 or 8 years ago. And I have nothing against books. I think I'm just going through one of those phases
Mhm.
where books are not where I get my information. Um, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and I also listen to YouTube videos in the background while I'm, cleaning, whatever,
Yeah.
cooking. Um, so it kind of goes in waves for me. Like, for a while, I was listening to a lot of astrology podcasts to kind of, or YouTube channels to kind of understand the energy of like what's going on right now. Pam Gregory.
Yeah. I was literally just thinking about her. She was one of the first
Yeah.
ones I saw with BRCA, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she does great. She does great, like little 20 to 30-minute summations of, the energy for a particular kind of 2-week period. And Serious Joy is another really good one. He does a big in-depth like weekly show every Sunday is when it comes out. It's really cool. But now I've kind of drifted away from that, and let me see. I'm really interested in what other people are kind of understanding in terms of consciousness expansion, tools for that, like breath work, microdosing, quantum healing, that kind of stuff. So I kind of just like use my podcasts, like the search engine, to pull up new shows all the time. So I think it's because I'm a mom. Like, I think that's a huge reason, to two little ones, that I take most of my information in audibly these days.
Yeah. And what do you consider channeling is? Talking about sort of Pam Gregory and BRCA, when they channel, and there's so many other ones, and this is something I kind of got. First, you hear people that they sometimes they change their voice, sometimes they don't, but they say they're channeling other entities, and it's something you think, oh, is this just a load of nonsense? But then when you hear some of the information that comes out and the way it's described in such a fluent way, you start to doubt the fact that you can't see how that's made up. It's just the way it comes out in such a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think channeling, I think there's two different kind of types of channeling, where one is like trance channeling, and I think there's probably varying degrees of trance channeling, like complete trance channeling, where like kind of like Daryl Anka, is that his name, and Bashar, where Daryl just sidesteps and Bashar just totally comes in and speaks. And then, there's, I think for some people it's a little bit half and half, like they're still kind of present, but another consciousness, another aspect of themselves, I think is usually what it is, but it could be, a separate consciousness comes in and speaks through them, and they're like a good example would be Abraham Hicks, but there are a lot of people that kind of do that half and half. And then I think like channeling, without it being a trance channeling thing, I feel like a lot of us do this these days, like more and more and more. I just feel like everybody's gifts are coming on board, like so significantly. But for myself, I'm not a trance channel. I'm always present when I'm channeling. But it's just like information comes through that was not the like byproduct of like a fabrication of my human consciousness mind. So I don't know if the information was already in there and I'm just channeling from my own subconscious. Possibly I could be channeling from the collective superconscious. I don't have like a council of 9 or anything like that I'm channeling from to my awareness. Information just comes through.
Yeah.
I often refer to it as they, but I don't know who they are. And so for example, I channeled a series of 8 transmissions last year called the Priestess Transmissions, which I then worked with my soul sister Amron Bevels to turn into a book. And while I was channeling that stuff, like I was there, I was speaking it. I can remember like sitting in my office and recording the information. But to this day, when I read a passage or I listen to it, I'm like, I totally forgot that I said that. I totally forgot. And I can tell, like it's almost like reading a book someone else wrote. Like, that's new information to me. That's not, it's not me passing on my own human consciousness wisdom. It's coming
Mm-hmm.
from somewhere else. But with the other kind of channeling, like, I had the craziest experience this week where I woke up in the middle of the night and realized that I was like, I don't know, it was like I was astral projected, but because I woke up in my body, I was then bilocated. And I, was, I don't know, it's so weird. I don't want to like tell my whole dream, nobody cares. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, the important point is that I remembered that I had been shown ships, because I don't like, spaceships confuse me. Okay, we can talk about that more if you want, but they
Yeah.
confuse me. So I was like, I'm always skeptical that ships exist. I'm not skeptical that interdimensional or extraterrestrial or aliens exist. I'm just skeptical of ships for whatever reason. And so when I woke up in the middle of the night, I remembered that I was being shown ships. And then I remembered, like, oh, I'm on a ship. And I remember an alien holding my face and telling me what I'm supposed to do. And the transmission that I got from the alien is that I'm supposed to start speaking light language and do like these hand movements and make intense eye contact with people and like do all these things
Mm-hmm.
and like write this light language and activate them into remembering who they actually are, like the wholeness of who they are. So their galactic selves, or their starseed selves, or their angelic origins, or whatever, like any of the multidimensional aspects of self that we can be. And since then, I have just been like talking light language, and that has never been on my radar before.
Okay.
Just speaking this, like to what you were saying about like voices changing, like sometimes my voice changes and I'm just walking around my house, and it just comes out of my mouth, and my kids are kind of like, what's that? And
Yeah.
so I feel like channels are really opening up, and there is a part of me that kind of wants to remain, like the 3D part of me that kind of still wants to remain skeptical. But from my own experience, I think it's real. I think maybe some people, it's possible that they're faking it, but I honestly don't think, like, who gets rich just like showing up and channeling nonsense,
Mm-hmm.
like from an inauthentic place.
Yeah.
I don't think it happens. I think that the people who truly are channeling some higher dimensional consciousness, people can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
They know through the transmissions that it's coming from somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what consciousness is ultimately, and it's without knowing what consciousness is, who can say what this thing is? That if it does seem made up, but it could be a higher consciousness that's coming through. And until we can say, oh, that's what consciousness is, who can say it isn't, from a scientific point of view. So you've got to be sort of open-minded and allow these things to come through, and to watch it and see how it all takes shape, really, and
Yeah.
embrace it. Yeah, it is a fascinating time, and I think you're right in terms of just some things happened. Has it been the last few years, or has it been the last decade? But there's been a lot more people becoming aware of light language, of channeling, of all these things. It seems to be a real explosion, although we're not seeing it on the media, and you wouldn't know it was happening until you get involved in this subject area. But it does seem to be get expanding at a crazy
Yeah.
rate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It feels to me like we're in the middle of a quantum leap in the collective consciousness this month. Like, it May to me feels like some kind of 100th monkey effect. Like, enough people are awake that, like, boom, we're on to another level. And I don't mean like utopia, everything is
Mm.
resolved. It's not like that, but like people are gonna, how do I put it? Like manifestations happening so fast. Healing is happening so fast. Time is moving so fast. And I feel like it's because there are, and psychic gifts are really, really activating for people, both spontaneously and intentionally being cultivated. And I think it's because, yeah, enough people are becoming like awake and aware and lucid within this experience that it's kind of like the 4-minute mile example that we always hear of, like before somebody actually did it, it was just kind of like a pipe dream, like it didn't exist. And then one person did it, and then, eventually another person, then another few people. And now it's not even really a thing anymore. It's just sort of
snowballing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you aware of Rupert Sheldrake and his morphic field resonance that he talks about in terms of how learning new experiences becomes easier as people around you learn those experiences? So the ability to I don't know, play an instrument gets easier as each generation. Or I think he did some experiments, I think with mice or rats or some animal that he trained. They weren't aware of some expert. They were in a cage and they had to pull a lever or something to get food, and they had like a little maze to go through, and they took a while to learn it, and then he would put new more rats in, or whatever animal it was, and they would learn it much quicker, and the next one would learn it much quicker, even though it had no interaction with each other. The fact that the rat mind had learned this maze and got it, the next one was able to do it. And I think it's a similar thing going on here, that as more and more people awake, more and more people around them are more able to awaken. Does that make sense? So I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but that's what I feel like. It's kind of like a self fulfilling prophecy, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 100%, and that made total sense to me. I think that's exactly what's happening. Is it's just like the collective mind that we have, that we share together. It's really solidifying this information.
Sure. And talking about this shift, what is 3D and 5D to you? I ask this question a lot, and I get different perspectives. It's quite interesting to hear how people relate to it.
Well, the answer I would have given last year would have been kind of different, but very much the same. But it's expanded for me now. So I don't even believe that we're in the 3D anymore. I believe that we are, like, the 3D to me is the experience of being in a physical, it's a physical experience. So when I kind of tune into, let's say the 1880s, I believe that was the 3D. Even the 1930s, even the 40s, 50s. I don't know, like, dates mean nothing, but like energetically, that feels like a very 3D time. And to me, where we are right now is we're purely in the fourth dimension, which is time, space, and the narrative. It's like the dream space, the astral, where stories play out and unfold over time. So it's like 3D was more of having a relationship with being a physical form in a body on earth. And 4D is more like understanding self and evolving that perception of self over time. And to me, 5D is a level of consciousness wherein we are anchored into our heart space as like the throne of our consciousness. So generally, I think we're operating from the mind, and the mind projects limitations that aren't objectively true. And we are constantly like analyzing, we're processing at like an informational level, processing data and engaging with each other from like let's say engaging with life choices from like pros and cons lists, kind of that sort of like data analysis. And then 5D to me is when we sort of surrender the idea that our mind can even control, for like there's so many unknown variables, right? And so, and the mind thinks that it knows what's up. It doesn't know what's up. It knows very, very little. So when we can get to a point where we are surrendered to the experience of life and we're in a place of self-trust, that we can meet whatever we experience. That doesn't mean it's going to feel good, but like we can handle it. And so we no longer attempt to mentally micromanage life. And we're then like kind of, you know, seated or anchored in our heart space, where we're connecting with each other more from a like an economy of love and generosity, an energy exchange of like genuinely caring about another person's well-being, but also caring about our own well-being, and just kind of like, I mean, I don't know if you've done mushrooms or anything like that, but it's kind of like the space that you get into when you're like on the exact perfect amount of mushrooms, where you just feel like it's just like life is good. You're just kind of blissed out, and you just love.
Yeah.
I think that that's what the 5D is. And I actually saw it one day while I was out for a walk, and I just kind of closed my eyes, and just suddenly everything made sense to me. And I was like, oh, that's what's happening, is we're kind of like flickering in and out of that heart space. We're flickering in and out of our light bodies, which I think, I mean, we're always in our light body, but it's like consciously in our light body. And when enough of us anchor into our light body, it's going to pull everyone else up into their light body, into that heart space. And the illusion will die, and we'll all experience this intense but temporary ego death. And then what it looked like to me was 5D New Earth is not a different planet. It really doesn't look like a different planet to me. It looks like this, like the consciousness of Gaia, a very similar environment, but way more lush. Like the plants are huge. The colors are so vivid, and everything glows with like an aura, because things aren't as solid or dense. They are more light based. And so it's not really like a new place. It's a new frequency range that is
heaven on
less
earth.
dense. It feels like that. It just feels like it reminds me a lot of Avatar. Pandora, like, you know, not that you can't get hurt or you can't die, or, you know, it has the characteristics of a physical environment, but the interconnectedness of everything is just so much more like everybody's so much more aware of it.
I think just reflecting back on what you just said, I feel for me, yes, 3D, very dense experience, very much about survival and the world you live in, the surroundings you live in, all the people around you. It's a matter of negotiating how you can just get through each day a little bit. It's sort of, as you say, it's about the physical experience and the ability to tune into yourself. And these things you just don't get time, or you're not even consciously aware of the importance of spirituality or being able to tune to yourself. It's just about trying to just get through each day for a lot of humans back in the 1800s, as you say, or even later. So that is a very much 3D. And for me, 5D, as you say, is the world around you, although it looks the same, there's still plants, there's still animals and everything, and there's still rivers and mountains, but it becomes a playground for manifestation, if that makes sense. And that's what I feel like I'm tuning into that now, in terms of, rather than just being here and existing in this random space, which is what the old world tells you, you're just this random blob of, of matter that somehow is aware of what's going on, and we're all just randomly on this planet through a fluke. But now I don't believe that. I believe, as a soul, I'm eternal in a way. I'm part of the cosmic mind, the global, the consciousness of the universe is, and I'm a fractal of it, a small element of it, experiencing. And this experience is all about manifestation of what I want to manifest. It's an opportunity, and it's just a very different conscious experience in pretty much what is the same world in terms of all the stuff out there. So yeah, I think it's just reflecting back to what you were saying. That's kind of how I see it. The 3D to 5D. Yeah.
I agree so much. Like it feels like it is a playground for manifestation, and I also don't feel like it's superior to 3D. It's just a different octave of frequency.
Yeah.
Like 3D has its own beautiful value. Like some of the ways we contextualize it is like the hardships of 3D, of like you were talking about survival and stuff like that. But I think 3D was like also very much about like an ultra focused, dialed in consciousness, and like a very strong ego, which isn't a bad thing. It's just like, like God self being fractalized into all these individuations, and each individuation in the 3D totally believes that this is all that they are, and operates from that perspective, and then creates outcomes from that perspective. And we're just in the process of evolving, shifting up to an expanded perspective of self that it's like, most of us, at least in this community anyway, we might not know exactly who or what we are, but we know that we at least know we're souls. We at least know, like you said, that we're like a fractal of the divine mind. And even the way that we like the outcomes we create, even from that perspective, are very different.
Yeah, totally. How do you describe the matrix? What would you say the matrix is?
I believe that there are two matrices. I believe that there is an organic matrix. And to me, what it looks like is it's similar to the movie The Matrix, where everything is code, binary code. But instead of like ones and zeros, I see geometries, tiny, tiny little geometries. And it kind of reminds me of, if you're like building an environment in AutoCAD or something, like you're like, a computer generated environment, and you haven't applied the textures yet. And it's this like blueprint, everything is the same substance. And then you apply the textures, and oh my gosh, everything looks like a different object. When I look at the world, the organic world, that's what I see, is that everything is made up of these geometric blueprints, and they're all kind of the same blueprints. Slight variations, for like a tree will have a different geometric form than a rock, for example, or a human, for example, but they're all geometries. So I see, that's how I understand that matrix. And the inorganic matrix, sort of the false control matrix, is like a screen of bullshit that is projected, this is what I mean by the 4D, like where I believe that we're actually not really in the physical experience anymore. I mean, we perceive that we're physical, but we are more anchored into our concept of who we are in relationship to narratives and traumas and dramas and stuff. So the false matrix is like the news, but also our entertainment media and our social media. And it creates this kind of screen where themes like, like Sam always talks about, it's like a haunted house, like a theme will come up like a boogeyman and be like,
Mhm.
woo,
Yeah.
here I am. And then we react to it. And the reaction tells us, like, am I still buying into this?
Mhm.
Do I believe that it can harm me or diminish me? Am I afraid of it, or do I feel like,
Mhm.
yeah, no, it's fine? And no answer is better than the other. I believe that we're all ultimately headed on the path towards coming home to
Yeah.
our sovereignty, where we're not being affected by these things, but it's a process to get there. And the false matrix, I used to, like, if we'd been talking in 2020, I would have thought, or even last year, I would have thought of the false matrix as being really negative, and still myself feeling kind of disempowered to it and angry that we were being lied to and controlled. And now I see that um, I do believe that we're being lied to and controlled, but that it's actually fine. Like, it doesn't matter in the long run of things. It really doesn't matter, because eventually you wake up to it and you can see it and you just choose to opt out. And it's
Yeah.
as simple as that. But it's a process to get there.
Yeah. It feels like talking about your analogy about playing the piano. This 3D is a certain notes are being played in a certain range in the piano, and we're shifting to a new range, but those
Yes.
notes are being played. So it's that part of the matrix, we're letting go of that, and it served a purpose. As you say, I too felt it was a controlling, very negative thing, but it was serving a purpose, anchoring our experiences in 3D for the time period that it has done. But now Guy has chosen to move to the new octave. It's a choice. It's a new experience, and as you say, it's not a better thing. It feels more closer to source in terms of consciousness, but as consciousness goes, consciousness wants to experience all octaves of the piano. It wants to dive deep to the bottom and go right to the top, and all notes in the piano are equally important, I guess, in a way, to create this sort of symphony. So I'm quite grandiose now, but I guess yeah, Gaia's and as this collective consciousness on Earth is shifting to a new octave, and that's what we're doing, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect analogy. Totally. Like those bass notes are so beautiful. They aren't bad. I think when we experience them, it's a little bit more intense and lonely. But again, that also brings me to this, like, I don't believe, sometimes we really shit on Earth, or I hear people shit on Earth and shit on humans and like humanity, and oh, we're so screwed up and all this. And I don't believe that we are immature souls being here.
Mm.
I don't believe that it, like, soul maturity even necessarily like works in that kind of hierarchy. I do believe that, like, eventually a given body of consciousness becomes ascended enough that it no longer it's like, if it goes back deep into the game, deep into that like deep 3D world, it just knows the whole time that it's a game. So it doesn't
Mm.
really, like when you've mastered Super Mario
Yeah.
or something, and
Mm.
it's just too easy
Yeah.
now. But I think that, like, being a human, being in 3D is a very high level, like super challenging. It's a super challenging task or a game or adventure for a given soul consciousness, and that there's no need to be so hard on ourselves for the way that we are here. We can always aim to do better,
Mm.
but the illusion runs deep.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how special Earth is in the cosmos, in this tiny blue orb in the Milky Way, but it does seem to be a specific or a particular realm where we are able to engage and to spiritually learn, engage with our traumas, and to go through a lot of the shit. I don't know how many other worlds are out there that allow for that experience. And right now, you might think it's horrible being here, and we would like to go and experience a world of bliss. But actually, when you're out in that bliss state, you'd probably want to come back and experience it again in a weird way from that highest perspective. You say, "Wow, that's an experience to have, to be on Earth, and to go through the minefield of all the traumas and limiting belief systems that you seem to just have programmed into you from an early age, and you have to spend the rest of your life trying to deprogram.
Yeah, totally. It's like,
Fascinating.
it's not an amateur game at all.
No. Totally. So you've mentioned quite recently on your podcast about quantum timeline healing. I wonder if you could elaborate on what that is.
Yeah. Okay. So this is something that I've been doing in the Akashic Records for a while. And it's really amazing. What I found is that, my favorite readings to do are when somebody comes with like a thing that it's like, like a bugaboo, like it's bothering them. It's in their blind spot. They can't see it with clarity, but the energy is pretty focused on it. And then I can connect to whatever past lives or what's the word I'm looking for? Like concurrent lives, whatever other lives it's connected to. And from there, you can find like every lifetime has like alternate timelines, right? So if we look at your life, Joe, you have various probable timelines. You have infinite possible timelines, and you have various probable timelines. And your consciousness is animating the timeline that based like a particular timeline based on the choices that you make. So say if you were dealing with a trauma or something was coming up for you, you kept having this repeating pattern and it was driving you crazy and you were like, what? Or somebody's really aggravating you. Like, some people have really difficult relationships with their parents and they're like, what? Like, what do I need to know to be released from this hell? Then let's say we go into your Akashic Records and we find, oh, this is related to another life wherein you were an indigenous person in a, part of the Amazon jungle, and you felt like you were, I don't know, attacked by somebody and you were killed or something like that. And it made you really angry. And there's still a lot of anger there. When I tune into that life, then the next point where the healing happens is I ask the question, like, what other potential timelines were available, like actually probable? So I'm not making up a different timeline. It's like, what other things could have happened that are available? And it's almost like, so then I see the person, like the indigenous person, let's say that you used to be in a past life, hypothetically, and I see an alternative timeline where you were attacked. It's not necessarily always about avoiding the catalyzing experience, but it's like you were attacked. But in this timeline, just as you were about to give up, you thought about your wife who was expecting a child, and you suddenly felt a surge of like, no, I'm not going to die. And you were able to fend off the person who was attacking you and defend yourself. And so you lived. And, then we see you through to the other, through that trauma. It actually heals that thing, because it's like your consciousness in that life got to experience a different outcome. So maybe I'll use a better example, like something I've actually seen for myself. I had this pattern of overbooking myself, like when I was working at a more traditional job as a midwife, and then as well when I was doing one-on-one Akashic readings, I would just let myself get overbooked. No matter how hard I tried to have strong boundaries, it was like I was working myself to the bone. It was crazy. And I was like, why does this keep happening? Like, I know, and I create these intentions, I set my hours, and things keep sneaking in, meetings and whatever, friends asking for a session, whatever stuff. And it's like, why? I know this isn't just about this life. And so I went into my own Akashic field and I found a life that was connected to where I was a nurse during what feels like probably the American Revolution, because it was pre-modern. There was not a lot of modernity, very 3D. And I was a nurse in a makeshift hospital, and there were just casualties rolling in, and they were like, it was disastrous. Like, I mean, things we could not heal and repair with our technology that we had available. And I also, unbeknownst to anyone, had tuberculosis while I was working. And there were just casualties pouring in all the time. And I kept working and working. And like I would, sleep for maybe 2 or 3 hours and keep working and working. And I just dropped dead in that life while I was working.
Okay.
And so there was this energy in the background for me in this life of like, for some reason, I can't say no to anything. Things keep pouring in. I can't, like, my boundaries aren't strong enough, and I don't know why. And so when I went in to do a healing for myself, a quantum timeline healing, I found a potential timeline wherein somebody recognized, like, saw me coughing up some blood and recognized that I was sick, and took me to a different wing of this makeshift hospital and put me in bed. And I still died, but I died resting. And that made all the difference. It sounds really trivial, but it was actually like a huge, like I could palpably feel the relief of, because it's an aspect of my consciousness that was still playing that, like almost like a ghost. Looping around in that energy.
I was going to ask actually about what you thought around the paranormal and ghosts. I think you've described it there in a sense. It's kind of consciousness still replaying loops in some way.
Yes.
It just needs releasing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I actually think that we are ghosts. Like I think that's also what soul retrieval is, but I didn't really need to retrieve that piece of my soul. It's like I just needed to get her out of that looping, like work until you literally die. And then it's like not even acknowledging that I died, just continuing in that energy, right? But I believe even in our lives, like even as I am right now as Amy, I probably have ghost aspects of me and I believe that's why the healing path is so important for all of us. Because, like, say for example, well, I remember going for a walk in an old neighborhood that I used to live in once, and I walked by the house that we had an apartment in, me and my friends, and I could feel, I was like, oh my God, I'm still there. It was the weirdest thing. It was like before, I was as awake as I am now. So I just thought I was crazy. But I remember that, like, I could feel my own, like, an aspect of me was still in that house. My energy was still in the house. And then I figured out later how to call myself back. But I think that happens for a lot of us. Like, we just, keep calm, carry on. But there's pieces of ourselves that get sort of left behind in, like, strongly emotionally charged spaces or times where we didn't fully metabolize what we were experiencing.
Yeah. And it sounds like the importance of healing is to go back into what we were saying earlier about deprogramming. These sort of programs that we're born somehow with programs from previous lives, and part of the experience on earth is to deprogram, to undo, and that's part of the healing, would you say?
Yeah. And it liberates so much of our energy towards that sovereignty and creatorship. It's hard to be in our like our true creatorship and like manifesting in the way that we actually are capable of doing when there's unresolved traumas in our energy field and pieces of ourselves that are so painful that we don't really know how to look at them, so we compartmentalize them and try to avoid it. Like, that's not a place where we're in our personal power, and if we're not in our personal power, then it's really hard to actually create what we want to experience rather than just sort of maintaining as best we can.
Sure. I wonder if we can change tack now and move into what's going on with regards to UFO disclosure, because it's quite an exciting time. I wonder if did you see the congressional hearings that were on? I don't know if they'll amount to anything, but it seems that the snowball on that front is rolling, in fact, getting faster and faster. So do you follow the sort of the aspects of UFO disclosure that's going on right now?
I'm not following anything that's going on right now, but I am
Okay.
interested in these things.
Yeah. So do you have any thoughts on sort of timelines regarding the disclosure? Do you have any thoughts about when we might, as a collective, be just basically aware that we're not alone fully and we can embrace the various
Yeah.
beings out there?
Yeah. I feel like it's going to be fairly soon, which is a vague, like, what does soon even mean?
Yeah.
But it does feel like it is like going to happen. Like, even if this, what you were referring to, a congressional hearing, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Even if that doesn't amount to anything, like, okay, so I'm going to back up for a second. The reason that I think it's going to be soon is because I think there are way too many of us that kind of know that we're not humans, even if we're in a human experience, that we carry a consciousness that isn't human. And like, we know it in a different way than we used to know it. Like, like in 2015, 2016, it's like we heard about it, but it wasn't. And like, it was kind of like, oh, maybe that's me. But also, there was a schism, there was a disconnect, and I feel like that gap is closing. And so there are a lot of us that are like, holy shit, I'm not a human. I am in a human incarnation, and so in a sense I'm human, but my consciousness is from elsewhere. And like, even to my dream experience just the other night, that was my first time having, like, to me that was a contact experience. It wasn't a dream. I was on a ship. I remember exactly what the being looked like. It was fascinating, and I knew that I was one of them, and that I'm like, they were telling me like, okay, it's time now for you to start speaking in light language, and that will help others to remember who they are. And um I know I'm not alone in this. I think that there are like, even just, I only shared it once on my social media and got, to me, it felt like a big response of people being like, yeah, I knew I wasn't human. Like, I know I'm not human. And so I believe that there's going to be a point where the government is going to, like, for damage control reasons, they're going to have to um, participate in like a disclosure that, and I don't really trust the government. Like, I don't think that they're going to tell the truth completely. Like, they'll tell a partial truth or whatever, because I really do think that they're operating from a damage control place. But I feel like there's a point that's coming. I believe that it's happening this year. Now, whether they disclose it this year or not, I don't know. It might actually be 2023 or possibly 2024. But by then, I think most people, even the ones who are still kind of asleep, in the sense that you know,
They're not engaging with it at all.
yeah. But it's also like, even as I say that, I'm like, they're not, most of them aren't really asleep anymore. They just are, it's too confronting for them. They're just choosing it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they can feel it too, but it's jarring, and they're not quite ready to allow it all in. But they aren't asleep. Most people aren't asleep the way that they were in 2019.
Yeah, I think I can agree to that in terms of people I talk to who I am not necessarily, engaging on topics like expanding consciousness with. But when you hear the UFO topic discussed amongst these people, that they're open to it. They're not completely dismissing it. I think the stigma's gone, in terms, well, it's going, it may be gone, in terms of people saying that you sound like crazy if you say anything other than we're in the universe, So yeah, it's around the corner. I think so too. I think by 2024, which is crazy to think, given where we were in 2019, 2020, how quickly what this turnaround could be, you know. And I know 2024 still seems quite far away, but you know, the grand scheme of things, in what 2, 3, 4 years, it's quite incredible change. Yeah. So in terms of as this podcast called Up the Vibe, what do you recommend for people who want to raise their vibration and open their third eye, awaken their third eye?
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's never been a better time. It's never been easier than it is right now. And my main tip, I think, would be that, like, so I have a couple, and they're fairly new downloads for me. The first one is really, really, really to clean out and clear out our bodies and our physical spaces. To really curate our physical space, for example. Like, I say this as a cluttery person. You can see I have not unloaded all of my totes in the background from our move.
Yeah.
It's, like it's a process, right? But I started getting these instructions that it's time now to let go of everything that we've been holding on to, whether it's for sentimental reasons or for kind of like, like prep, like, wanting to be prepared kind of reasons, or even that we just have objects in our lives because the rat race is so busy that we don't have time to like it's so easy to bring things into our home. Takes a lot of time to sort through it and get rid of stuff. So it's not a pressure thing, but it's like something about liberating ourselves from the attachments that we have and the constructs is really important. Getting rid of things from our space really intentionally does a lot to bring our consciousness back into coherence, as well as our physical body. And I shared on my last podcast episode, I kind of went on a rant that I don't believe that we have to be vegan or vegetarian in order to raise our vibration. I think that's a myth, and it can be quite destructive if people just follow it, and override their own intuition and what their body is actually asking for. I believe that what we're being called to is to eat more intentionally, consume more intentionally, and try to eliminate processed foods as much as possible, because our body doesn't recognize that as food. Our energy field doesn't recognize it. It's been altered. It's not of value to us, and it just holds our vibration down. And then the other thing is a piece of information that came through recently that's so interesting, where I became aware that, like, we're all having traumas come up all the time right now. Like 2020, 2021, even 2022 have been so confronting. Like, our shadow is being thrown in our face from a million different directions. Our relationships with people have been tested. It's been a very, very intense period. But the directive that I got recently is that, we're still having things come up, but now, rather than having to deconstruct it and do a lot of trauma healing, we're just in a release phase, and it's time to release that information up to data collection. There's like a data collection department of consciousness that is using everything that we've been through. Like we no longer have to carry this shit around in our energy fields as like part of us. So it's not a spiritual bypassing thing, because the process of data collection kind of still means that we have to feel it. But like, for example, I just had a really, like, this past week, I had like survival and scarcity money things come up for me, like super, super triggered, and, brought up lots of anxiety and kind of something I haven't dealt with at this level in a long time. And this morning I finally was like, oh my God, right. Just send it up to data collection. Just like, this doesn't have to mean anything about you or for you. It doesn't mean, like, whatever happened in the past isn't yours anymore, because it's kind of like the Amy that I was in the past, she's already gone. It doesn't exist anymore. So I still have to feel it, but then I just send it up to data collection, and then it's out of my field. It doesn't belong to me anymore. And I instantly like, it's gone. The external circumstances haven't changed, but I just don't feel burdened by it anymore. And I'm seeing that coming up with a lot of things, like the trauma that we have all experienced and has become an integrated aspect of who we believe we are. Now we just get to release it and disentangle ourselves from it, where it's just like, oh, I was never that. Like, it's almost like somebody else had the experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think in terms of being able to sort of witness your own life, almost like it's a movie in its own right. And
Yeah.
it's all parts of going. I like to think of myself as going down a stream, and you can choose to go with the stream or against it. But at the end of the day, it's all just happening, and it's just flowing. It's all part of a movie, and it's best to experience it and just go with the flow than to butt against the edges. And in terms of what you're saying, you kind of part of it, you experiencing it, and it's all very important. But it's not you. It's your consciousness experiencing this reality for
Yes.
reasons that you might not understand, but at a higher level, the higher consciousness level, you can see why it's playing out and the importance of it from the whole galactic consciousness as a whole, and the need to experience all the different multi-dimensional realities there are, possibilities. It's almost as if consciousness is trying to answer the questions of what is good and what is evil, what is free will, these are sort of fundamental questions. To answer those, how do you answer those? You have to have experiences, and we're part of those experiences.
Yes, exactly. That's
Yeah.
beautifully put. Exactly. Like we are just we are like portals of experience so that those questions could get answered. And none of the things that we go through actually mean anything about us. It's kind of like remembering that you are not the character in the game, you're the gamer playing the character. And so, like, if you were playing Red Dead Redemption and your horse got killed, your character might feel something about that, but the gamer doesn't, because it's a game. So, I really have to stress that this is new. It wasn't like this for us before. I think it has to do with that raise in consciousness. And also, I am not talking about spiritual bypassing. I'm not saying like, oh, there's a higher reason for everything to happen, and so we don't need to feel it. It's like, no, you just feel it with no resistance to the feeling. Like all the pain comes from resisting the intensity of, an uncomfortable feeling. But when you just kind of, that's what I mean by data collection. Like this morning when I was like, oh, Amy, stop fighting it. Just feel it, feel all of the anxiety, all the survival triggers, whatever. And then like let it go up to data collection and then carry on, because it doesn't mean anything about you or for you. Then it was like, it finally got to be liberated out of my field. So my frequency can go back up again.
Yeah, totally. Oh, it's been a really amazing chat. And I wonder how could people reach you and find out more about you and your podcast?
Yeah, thank you so much. So my podcast is Third Eye Awakening, and it is on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher Breaker, all the places, pretty much all the places, I think. It's also on YouTube. And you can also just find me at my website, which is amybelair.com. I have some low-cost programs around developing our psychic abilities, which I'm really excited about, as well as some light codes that I channeled over the last year to facilitate our ascension. And I always have kind of higher level mentorship and group programs for people who are like, yeah, I need to go down this path and I need to go all in.
Okay.
And on Instagram, I am cosmic.oracle. And I have a free Facebook group called Soul Space, which is an amazing place to come and share the the experiences that you're having and ask your questions. It's like
Sure.
such a beautiful community. Everybody's so supportive and loving there.
And I forgot to say at the start, congratulations for reaching your 100 episodes, 100
Thank
shows.
you.
What are you calling? Yeah, great achievement.
Yes.
Well, thank you again. Hopefully, we can speak a third time one day.
Yes, I'm sure that we will, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun to
Thank you.
talk with you.